The shoji panel slides closed. Not slammed, that is not the word. It moves on its track the way a practiced hand moves. A few inches at first, then a pause, then the last pull that latches it softly against the cedar frame. The sound it makes is barely a sound at all. A breath. The last breath of the evening. It is 8:30 in Ogimi village, on the northern tip of Okinawa, and a 91-year-old woman on the Fukuji hillside has just sealed her house against the night. She is 91. Her family has farmed the hillside above the Fukuji River for 4 generations. The sweet potato rows her grandmother planted are still producing. The shoji her father fitted into the kitchen doorway in 1961 still slides on its original track, though the paper was replaced twice. When the grandmother on the Fukuji hillside closes it at 8:30, the house becomes a different place, quieter, cooler, the air from the ridge moving through the ranma panels above the door while the room below settles. She will be asleep before 9. The evening habits of Okinawa's centenarians are not accidents. They are the result of 4 specific practices. 4 things. The oldest villagers in Ogimi and Kunigami cut from their lives after the war, when the American bases and the mainland cargo ships brought in a new kind of evening, a heavier kind. 4 habits that most of the Western world still hands back to itself every single night, without thinking about it. That shoji is going to tell us all 4. Stay with me through this video, because the second habit is one I almost guarantee you do every night, and the 4th habit is one your house is built to make you fail at. Her neighbor, an 87-year-old widow whose husband had lived to 104, described the old evening rhythm to researchers from the Okinawa Centenarian study in the early 2000s this way. We ate when the sun was still up. When the sun went down, we stopped. She had farmed alongside her husband for 60 years. She had watched the post-war years bring different habits. She was specific about when the change happened. After the bases came, after the cargo ships, after the canned meats and the late suppers. The Willcox brothers Bradley and Craig Willcox, along with Makoto Suzuki, documented Okinawa's dietary shift in their landmark 2007 paper on Okinawan dietary history. The pre-war and immediate post-war records from Ogimi village show something consistent. The heaviest meal of the day in centenarian households was the midday meal. The evening meal was small, a bowl of miso broth, a few sweet potatoes, already cooling, pickled vegetables, maybe a piece of grilled mackerel if the morning catch had been good. The hara hachi-bu principle, the practice of stopping at roughly 80% fullness, was applied with particular discipline at the evening table, not just at midday. The body going into sleep was a lightly loaded body. That is the first habit the oldest Okinawans eliminated from their evenings. The large, late dinner. Think about what the body is actually doing during digestion. It is running a metabolic engine. Core temperature rises. Blood is shunted to the gut. Insulin is spiking. The pancreas is working. The liver is processing. None of that activity is compatible with the cooling, settling, parasympathetic shift the body needs to enter deep sleep. When you eat a heavy meal at 8 at night and lie down at 10, you are asking the body to do 2 contradictory things at once: repair and digest. It does neither well. After the American occupation shifted eating patterns in southern Okinawa, the Willcox documentation traces this shift clearly. Through the 1950s and 1960s, the evening meal grew, protein portions expanded. Canned meats from the bases became status foods. The meal moved later. The body going to sleep was now digesting a full meal. Its core temperature elevated, its metabolic work unfinished. The elderly woman from Ogimi was blunt about the change. The stomach was too busy. How could you sleep? The pre-war pattern was not about restriction, it was about timing. The body's digestive work was done before dark. The evening was for the body to cool and quiet, not to process. Researchers tracking centenarian households in the early 2000s noted something that did not make it into the final published papers, but appears in the field notes. The time gap between the last meal and bedtime in the oldest Ogimi households was consistently 3 to 4 hours. Not because anyone was counting, because the rhythm of the day made it inevitable. Dinner at 5:30 or 6, bed at 9. The body had time to finish. The woman who closes the shoji at 8:30, at 91, still follows the midday anchor. Her largest meal is at noon: sweet potato, tofu, a generous portion of goya, sometimes a small piece of pork stewed for hours until it falls apart. By 6 in the evening, she has had her miso bowl and a few pickled vegetables. She is done. Her granddaughter, who visits from Naha on weekends, eats a full dinner at 8. The granddaughter is 48 and on 2 medications. The grandmother is 91 and on none. Same kitchen, different clock. Move with me to the second house up the road. An 89-year-old in Ogimi, who still opens both windows at sunset, lives 200 meters up the road, in a concrete house built in 1973, the new construction that came to Ogimi in the post-war decades. The walls are cinder block. The windows are fitted with aluminum frames, but she does something unusual for a concrete house in 2026. Every evening, she opens the windows. All of them. She does not run the air conditioning unit mounted above the east window. She opens the windows and lets the ridge air move through. She explained this to the Okinawa Centenarian study researchers by pointing at the wall. That machine cools the air, but it seals it. We always had moving air. The traditional Okinawan home was built for it. Shoji panels on both sides of the sleeping room, one facing the interior courtyard, one facing the outside, created a cross-draft when both were open. The Ranma transom panels above each shoji panel were left open permanently in the warm months, allowing the cooler night air from the hillside to move through at low speed across the sleeping futon. The futon itself was laid directly on tatami, which breathes and dissipates heat faster than a raised bed frame. Sleeping cool is not a preference. It is a mechanism. The body's core temperature drops naturally in the hours leading to deep sleep. That drop is part of what initiates the slow wave phase. When a room holds heat, the body fights against its own cooling process. The disruption is measurable. People sleeping in rooms above 24 degrees Celsius show reduced time in slow-wave sleep. The studies on this come from general sleep architecture research, not specifically from Okinawa, but the pattern in the centenarian homes is consistent enough to be notable. This 89-year-old sleeps in a concrete box. She opens every window anyway. That is the fourth of the 4 habits, a sealed, heated, ventilated room, but I have brought it forward because she is standing at her window right now, and the image is right. There is something else worth saying about the cross-draft before we move on. Air movement across the body, even slow. Ambient movement accelerates evaporative heat loss from the skin. The body cools faster. The skin temperature drops faster. The signal to the hypothalamus that initiates the slow-wave cascade arrives sooner and more cleanly. A still, sealed room sends a muddled signal. The body has to do more of the cooling work internally. The result is later sleep onset and shallower depth. The 89-year-old does not know about hypothalamic thermoregulation. She knows the room feels right when the air is moving. The body knew before the science did. Let me go back to the second habit, because it is the one most people watching this right now have not given up. Before the post-war electrification of northern Okinawa, the grid reached Ogimi fully in the mid-1960s. Centenarian households were lit by a single oil lamp in the evening. Not because they were poor, though resources were modest, because the lamp was sufficient. The lamp was placed on a low table in the main room and produced warm, directional light. By 8 o'clock, the lamp was turned down. By 8:30, it was out. What the lamp did not produce was blue spectrum light. Incandescent bulbs, when they arrived in the 1960s, began to. Fluorescent tubes, when they spread through Ogimi in the 1970s, produced it heavily. Television, arriving in the same period, added a second source. A screen in the bedroom, or the adjacent room, pulsing blue spectrum light into the ceiling, through closed eyelids, at 11 at night, at midnight, at 1 in the morning. The relationship between evening light and disrupted sleep is documented. Charles Czeisler and Stephen Lockley at Harvard's Brigham and Women's Hospital have published extensively on how blue spectrum light suppresses melatonin and delays the circadian onset of sleep. The precise suppression window, the exact lux levels, the dose response, those details vary between studies, and I am not going to give you a single number and pretend there is consensus, because there is not. What the research agrees on is this. Evening light exposure, particularly in the blue spectrum range, and particularly in the 2 hours before intended sleep delays, melatonin onset. A delayed melatonin onset pushes back the circadian signal that the body uses to initiate slow-wave sleep. Melatonin is not a sleep drug. It is a darkness signal. The pineal gland releases it in response to the absence of light reaching specialized receptors in the retina, receptors that are particularly sensitive to wavelengths in the blue range, around 460 to 480 nanometers. the exact range where modern overhead LEDs, fluorescent tubes, and screen backlights happen to peak. When those wavelengths hit the retina at 9 at night, the pineal gland reads the signal as daylight. It does not release melatonin on schedule. The downstream cascade, the body temperature drop, the heart rate drop, the slow-wave architecture arrives late or not at all. The 91-year-old on the Fukuji hillside does not own a smartphone. She owns a television, but it sits in the front room, not the bedroom. She watches it occasionally in the early evening, then turns it off. By 8, she is not in front of any screen. By 8:30, the shoji is closed, and the only light in the inner room is what remains of the dusk filtering through the Ranma transom. The habit the Ogimi Centenarians eliminated was not television per se. Television barely existed in Okinawa during the years when these women were forming their routines. The habit they never acquired was the bright, blue-lit, screen-anchored late evening that the post-1965 household assumed as a default. The contrast group is not abstract. Walk through Naha, in southern Okinawa, where the American base culture landed first and hardest, and the evening looks like any other post-war city. Bright overhead lights at full brightness until midnight, the phone in bed. What changed in Naha was not discipline. What changed was architecture. When the single oil lamp is replaced by overhead fluorescence controlled by a wall switch, the default is light. You have to decide to turn it off. The old lamp was the opposite. It required effort to keep burning. Every centenarian home in Ogimi that researchers described from that era used low, warm, directional light by default. The architecture made the healthy behavior the easier one. The phone-in-bed habit is the 2020s version of the same problem. The screen produces light, yes, but the deeper issue is what the screen does to the state of mind. The lamp in the old Ogimi kitchen produced no notifications. It carried no social comparison, no news cycle, no algorithm keeping the reticular activating system in low-grade alert. The body can be in a darkened room and still be running the neural equivalent of a midday stress response if the last thing it processed before sleep was a news headline. This is partly speculation on my part. The neuroscience of phone use and sleep is more complicated than any single mechanism explains. But the behavioral pattern in the centenarian interviews is consistent. The last hour before sleep in the oldest Ogimi households was characterized by near silence and near darkness, not by stimulation. The daughter of the 87-year-old widow from Ogimi lives in Naha. She goes to sleep at 12:30. She is 63 and already has the chronic fatigue that her mother, at 87, does not. The interview transcripts from the Okinawa Centenarian study record her describing her own sleep this way. "I sleep, but I don't rest. My mother sleeps, and she rests." The distinction is not poetic, it is physiological. Fragmented, melatonin, delayed sleep produces enough unconscious time to feel like sleep, but not enough deep architecture to feel like rest. Two people in the same family, two entirely different relationships to the night. Set that aside for a moment. Here is the third habit. A 93-year-old farmer above the Aha River is the oldest resident on that hillside, in Kunigami, 40 kilometers north of Ogimi. The Aha River runs fast in the rainy season and nearly stops in August. Her house has the same Ranma panels, the same tatami mat in the sleeping room, the same wooden shelf with a single cup above the kitchen sink. Researchers from the broader Okinawa Blue Zones documentation have interviewed her family twice. Her evening habit, the third of the four, is something her daughter described in passing, almost as an aside, during the second interview. She never drank at night. The awamori was for the afternoon. Awamori is Okinawa's traditional distilled spirit, made from long-grain indica rice. It has been part of Okinawan culture for centuries. The pre-war centenarian pattern, documented in the Willcox ethnographic notes, placed awamori consumption in the early to mid-afternoon with lunch, or at most in the early evening, well before sunset, not as a nightly ritual, and never immediately before sleep. The post-war change came partly from the American base culture, which brought beer and late-night drinking, and partly from the influence of Japanese mainland norms, where sake or shochu with the evening meal is customary. The late-night drink a glass of something before bed to help you sleep became embedded in the post-war Okinawan household in a way it had not been before. Here is what happens in the body when alcohol is consumed in the last 2 hours before sleep. The initial sedative effect is real. Alcohol increases adenosine, suppresses neural activity, and can shorten the time it takes to fall asleep. That is the feeling people interpret as, "It helps me sleep." It does not. It helps you lose consciousness. The two are not the same thing. In the second half of the night, as the liver processes the alcohol and acetaldehyde levels rise, sleep architecture fragments. REM sleep is suppressed, the phase where the brain consolidates memory and processes emotion. Slow-wave sleep, the phase in which the brain's glymphatic function is most active, in which growth hormone is released, in which the day's cellular repair happens, is disrupted. The body wakes more frequently in the second half of the night. Sometimes those wakings are conscious, the 3 a.m. stare at the ceiling. Sometimes they are micro-arousals the sleeper never remembers, but that still fragment the architecture. Either way, the person does not feel rested in the morning. They feel like they slept badly without knowing why. Wait, I want to be careful here, because the mechanism I just described is well established, but the specific interaction between Awamori and Okinawan Centenarian sleep patterns is not a subject of dedicated controlled study. What the Okinawa Centenarian study documents is behavioral and observational. The oldest villagers do not drink right before bed. The mechanism for why that matters comes from general sleep research. I am connecting two threads that the literature supports but is not formally stitched together. The elder above the Aha River, at 93, does not drink after sunset. Her daughter says, the Awamori comes out at lunch, sometimes, never at night. That was always the rule. The rule predates the science by generations. Her granddaughter, who lives in Okinawa, drinks shochu with dinner. She is 44. The conversation her daughter described, the interview moment where this came up, had a small detail worth noting. The daughter said, "My mother always told me the Awamori is for when the sun is still in the sky. It is a daytime thing, not a moral judgment, a categorization. The Awamori belongs to the day. The night is for something else." There is a related thread here that the Willcox team noted but did not develop. The pre-war Okinawan Centenarians who did drink Awamori in the afternoon often did so in social settings with neighbors, on the porch, in connection with the moai, the small lifelong friendship circles that anchor Okinawan social life. The drink was relational, not anesthetic. The post-war evening drink, by contrast, is often consumed alone, in front of a screen, specifically to numb. The pharmacology might be the same molecule, the function is not. This is the kind of distinction the centenarians make easily and that I find myself fumbling for words to describe in English. The drink is the same, the day is different. The role of the drink in the day is what changes. Let me close the loop on the fourth habit, since I introduced it early and have not fully returned to it. The sealed, heated room is the habit most invisible to the person practicing it, because it is built into the house. You do not consciously decide to sleep in a sealed environment. Your house has central heating. Your bedroom has a door that closes, your windows have been engineered for thermal efficiency, and your duvet was selected for warmth in a way the futon never was. The default of the modern American or European house, particularly in the colder months, is a stable, warm, sealed sleeping environment. The default of the traditional Okinawan house was the opposite. The mechanism, again, core body temperature drops by roughly 0.5 degree to 1 degree Celsius in the hours before deep sleep and continues dropping through the first half of the night. That drop is what initiates and sustains slow-wave sleep. The drop is signaled to the hypothalamus, partly through skin temperature changes. When the skin senses cooler ambient air, particularly at the extremities, the body interprets it as a cue to begin the internal temperature descent. A warm, sealed room blunts that signal. A cool, ventilated room amplifies it. The 89-year-old in the concrete house on the Ogimi hillside opens her windows even in February, when the night temperatures on the northern Okinawan ridge can drop to 7 or 8 degrees Celsius. She uses a heavier futon. She does not heat the room. The cold air comes in. The skin senses it. The cascade starts. Her cousin in Tokyo, 68 years old, sleeps in a sealed apartment with the heater on a timer. The cousin takes a sleep medication. The 89-year-old does not. Same genetic line, different architecture. The four habits the oldest Okinawans cut from their evenings form a coherent logic when you see them together. The large late meal keeps the body's metabolic engine running when it should be cooling. The bright artificial light and its modern extension, the screen in every room, delays the circadian signal that tells the brain it is time to shift into deep repair. The late-night drink fragments the sleep architecture in the second half of the night, when the most restorative sleep should be happening. And the sealed, heated room prevents the core temperature drop that the body needs to initiate and maintain slow-wave sleep. None of these are small things. None of them are obscure. They are all habits that the pre-1955 Ogimi Centenarian household did not practice, and that the post-1955 westernized Okinawan household adopted as default. There is a phrase in Japanese that is hard to translate precisely ma. It refers to the interval, the pause, the negative space that gives the positive space its meaning. The old Okinawan evening was built on ma, the gap between the last meal and sleep, the darkness between the lamp going out and the body settling, the stillness that the shoji was meant to hold inside the house. Post-war life filled the ma with light and food and noise. The centenarians in Ogimi did not fill it. They left it open. The futon on the tatami was laid into that gap, and the body knew what to do. The Willcox research team, in their longitudinal comparisons between mainland migrant Okinawans and island resident Okinawans, found a consistent pattern. Okinawans, who moved to the Japanese mainland or to Brazil and adopted the food and lifestyle norms of those places, lost the longevity advantage within one generation. The second generation showed disease rates similar to the host population. The loss was not genetic. It was behavioral. The specific behaviors most closely correlated with the longevity advantage are still being refined in the research, but the evening practices of the island centenarians are documented with unusual consistency across the Willcox and Buettner interview records. This matters because it answers a question people ask me constantly. Is the Okinawan longevity a genetic gift? Something the rest of us cannot copy? The migration data says no. The same DNA, transplanted into a Sao Paulo apartment, with a late dinner and a television in the bedroom, produces the same diseases as the Brazilian neighbors. The protection was never in the genes, it was in the evening. There is one thread in this data I genuinely do not know how to weight. The pre-war Okinawan centenarians, who are now in their 90s and 100s, formed their habits during a period of significant caloric restriction. The post-war famine years in northern Okinawa were severe. It is not fully separable, in the data, how much of their metabolic efficiency and sleep architecture is a result of their specific practices, and how much is a product of a formative period of genuine scarcity that recalibrated their systems. The Willcox research acknowledges this. The centenarians themselves do not make the distinction. They describe their habits as customs, not as adaptations to hardship. What is clear is this: the practices exist, they are specific, they are documentable, and they differ from the habits of the generations that followed. Same village, different generation, different outcome. The Willcox team noted, in passing, that the most striking physical characteristic of the oldest Ogimi residents during their in-home visits was not their diet or their movement patterns. It was what they described as evenings that seemed to have no drama in them. That observation is qualitative, not clinical, but it stayed in the research notes. No urgency, no anxious cleanup, no final email, no late snack, no nightcap to take the edge off. The day ended because the day was over. The windows of the concrete house on the Ogimi hillside are open. The ridge air is moving through the aluminum frames she does not particularly like, but she opens them anyway because this is what evening air is supposed to do: move. Her futon is already laid out on the tatami in the inner room, not a mattress on a frame. The tatami mat is cool to the touch. The futon is thin enough that the body heat dissipates through it by 11 o'clock, drawing the skin temperature down with it. By 8:30 she is lying down. Not yet asleep, perhaps, but horizontal. The windows are open. The shoji between the sleeping room and the front room is closed. The 91-year-old on the Fukuji hillside, 200 meters down the road, closed hers at the same time. The sound it made was barely a sound at all.